Hello and welcome again to Intelligence regular webinar series. Delighted this week to be talking about a subject where we've had a great deal of requests for information. And I'm also combining it with the most recommended guest we've been told to have on the show, Mr. Gary King. So he is indeed that good looking in real life as well. So this week we are going to be talking about practical planning for SMEs. And how do you create more time? How do you earn more money? And how do you have more choices in your business? And we frequently hear from people about overwhelm being a massive issue. So what better to do than get an expert on the subject in Mr. Gary King. So Gary, welcome. Delighted to have you with us here today, and look forward to your introduction. I know people will be fascinated to hear about your experience, as was I. So what am I going to be covering off today, or between us with Gary and I? First of all, I will be introducing Gary. We are going to be talking in the context of planning, first to get some idea about, well, why do people plan? What does success mean to an individual? Once we've looked at that, where are you now? What's your personal circumstance? If you can identify that, then that leads on to having a really good idea about, well, where are you going to start? Now, as always, we have a Q&A session scheduled for the end, but as the many regular attendees of these webinars will know, we try and get these questions into the flow of the conversation where they're relevant. We tend to find that gets richer answers. As always, if we don't get the chance to cover off your question, we've got our contact details at the end. We'll also have Gary's contact details at the end. So please fire in any questions. And as everybody knows, we will always come back to everybody. So without further ado, let's get into the introductions. And Gary, when you've done your intro, be really good to have a quick nod to the budget this week as well. I know people have probably digested it all, but it would be remiss of me not to get your expert opinion on that as well. So introducing Mr. Gary King. Gary, it is over to you.
Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm really looking forward to this. I think let me just backtrack a little bit. I was unsure when I was leaving school what I wanted to do. My dad had always been an engineer, amongst 3,000 other jobs that he'd done. So I applied for an engineering apprenticeship at Barnbow in Leeds, and I was knocked back. I wasn't successful. So I finished up going to engineering college, and as part of that 2-year program, I was given a work placement, and that company offered me a job, and I was there for 15 years. So started off as a T-boy, finished up as a senior manager in that business. And part of that role was mentoring junior members of staff, mentoring graduates and apprentices. And I loved that. I left there and went to work in a FTSE 100 PLC. That first business was a 40 million turnover business. The FTSE 100, 2 billion turnover PLC, where I was running businesses and turnaround in businesses, again, mentoring. And I just love that aspect of the job. But for anybody that's worked for somebody else, you're not in control of your own destiny.
Very true.
And it was 2010, actually, in the midst of the last recession, I got an opportunity to leave. It was time for me to leave. And I just saw hundreds of business failures around me. My dad had gone from one failure to another in his various business ventures. And I thought, I want to use that 25 years of experience, mentoring, running businesses, helping people, to help those many, many hundreds of small business owners that were failing. And, that's when Tendo was born, 2010. And I've never looked back, working with those small business owners to help them develop the plans and guide them through those muddy waters is something that I've loved every single day of for approaching 11 years now.
Fantastic. And, I think quite timely, given that the circumstances when you started your business and the circumstances that many people are facing now. That, just as I said in the intro, just a quick snapshot, Gary. We just had the budget. Just a high level view from you.
Yeah, I think it's an ambitious and a bold budget. I think the challenge that any chancellor has got in any environment is that you can't please everybody. I've seen a few moans and groans that this isn't right and that doesn't work for me. But I think what they've done is they've acknowledged the challenges that small businesses face over the next 12 or 18 months. It's not going to be a quick recovery. So the funding they've put in place to help sectors like hospitality, the enhanced allowances they've given on capital expenditure, the access to more loans and government-backed schemes. I think a majority of what they've done is going to be very, very helpful to a majority of small businesses over the next couple of years as we look to bounce back from the impact of the last 12 months. I think the biggest issue that will cause a raised eyebrow is a significant increase in corporation tax for businesses earning over £50,000. But those businesses earning over £50,000 have got a couple of years to plan how they're going to go about servicing that liability. So I think as an overall, a very ambitious budget, a very good budget, and one that will help many businesses get back on the feet for sure.
Yeah, I think the point there about planning is really interesting, because the one thing we've seen at Intelligent over the last few months is the difference in people that availed themselves of the financial support and the loans, and the ones that used it wisely and the ones that didn't. And I know there was a lot of stories bandied about people getting new cars and one thing and another, but we've seen some shockers where they've got the loan and they haven't factored in the fact that loan's going to need repaying, and the new owners are not going to want to be taking on that debt, and and it's so planning the use of the resources available is absolutely critical, and quite a timely link to our conversation today.
And do you know what, Mark? I think we're not going to get sick of using that word planning, but the whole point of the Sybil's loans and the bounce back loans were to invest in growth and planning for your future. And those businesses that have just taken it for working capital, that haven't then put the foundations in place, or people that have taken directors' loans that they weren't allowed to take and invested the money elsewhere, they are going to suffer. The government has spent billions and billions of pounds over the last 12 months, and they're going to want that money back if it's been spent inappropriately. So anybody that spent it inappropriately, I think they can expect to knock on the door at some point.
Yeah.
Those businesses that haven't invested in growth, infrastructure, planning, unfortunately, I think there's a high chance that some of those are going to catch a cold at some point, and they're going to finish up in a greater predicament than they were when they took that loan out when that liability is due. Yeah. I am hearing and seeing lots of businesses that have invested that money very, very wisely.
Same.
And I think they are going to come out of this faster, leaner and meaner than their competition. I think it's going to give them a head start.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see that in the businesses we brought to market, the interest you get in those businesses and people doing their due diligence. We've had some real counterintuitive things with the speed of which some businesses and quite sizable transactions have turned around is much quicker than we've seen in the past. And mainly that's because people have a little more focus because there's not so much going on. But people are seeing opportunity and they're moving decisively, which is great because they recognize that business has got a plan. It's easy to buy, it's easy to deal with, and everything you need to have in place is in place. So excellent. Anyway, that's an infinitely longer period of time than I thought we'd spend on our first slide. Rest assured, anyone watching that the pace does pick up a little bit. It's not just us chatting in depth about that, but really interesting. Thank you very much for that, Gary. And look, let's get into the subject we're here for, which is planning for SMEs. So
yeah, sure.
If we if we start with the end in mind, Gary, and I'm very much going to hand over to you in this regard. It is a cliche, Stephen Covey, everyone knows the book, about habits of effective people and starting with the end in mind. But if you are going to plan, you need to know where you're going, and you're going to end up in the wrong place otherwise. And it doesn't matter how efficient and effective you've been at getting there. If you've got to the wrong place, then we're in the wrong place. So, I'm really interested by the view that, when we look at building a business, and people talk a lot in financial terms, but as any, really successful business owner with a purpose knows, it's not just about the money. The money is an enabler or a reward for doing the right things. So you just talk us through these views here about, building the right business, this thing about getting choice, which is so important, especially when people feel like they have no choice. Financial freedom is obviously a big thing for everybody, and then ultimately you want to make sure what you're building is the right thing. So if you just encapsulate, in your experience of working with people, how this definition of success manifests itself and comes into play, becomes reality, and actually drives performance.
Yeah, sure. I think just to give this some context, statistically, only 1 in 4 small business owners, so less than 25%, actually have a written down shared business plan. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why they don't have a plan.
Okay.
23% is the statistic.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, to put that in context, there's 5.9 million small business owners in the UK.
Yeah.
Less than 25% of those have a written down plan. Now, a plan for me in business terms is a bit like jumping in your car when you're going on a long journey and sticking the sat nav on. Having a plan is your sat nav for your business. It tells you what your destination is, what route you're going to take, how you measure success, and what your alternatives are when you hit a traffic jam. Now, in business terms and in business owner terms, the definition of success for me isn't the financial rewards. That's one of the benefits for sure, but it's about doing something that puts fire in your belly every day.
Totally.
And what I find when I meet business owners that are trapped, and they are trapped by the very business they thought was going to free them, is that they're not building the right business. They're building a business that means they're having to work longer hours than they want. They're having to not pay themselves what they want to get paid if they get paid at all. And the business is effectively running them rather than them running the business.
Yeah, totally.
So they can't escape. They're overwhelmed. They hit this glass ceiling and they don't know how to escape. So they're not building the right business. And that manifests itself in overwhelm, in anxiety, in questioning whether they're building the right business and if they've done the right thing.
Yeah, no, fully understood.
Yeah.
And you know, when we see people talking about, you know, reasons for selling the business, and ill health is one of them, you know, or they've just had enough or anything else, you know, that's all avoidable.
I've got a guy that I've just engaged with, and he goes from loving his business one day to being completely overwhelmed and overworked and doesn't know which way to turn the next day. And he says, I want to sell the business. And that's his stock answer when things aren't going well, is I'm going to sell up. Yeah. So we've got a majority of business owners, and in fact, all business owners are in one of these 4 boxes. But a majority that I meet that are trapped and not building the right business. They're building something that doesn't put fire in the belly anymore. It doesn't excite them. They'll lose the mojo.
Yeah.
What you've got to do is create a business that gives you financial freedom. Now, the reality is that most business owners are working longer hours than they need because they're doing everything in the business.
Yeah.
They can't build a dream team because they don't have the finances to afford a dream team. So generating the financial freedom means you can build cash reserves to invest in growth. A large part of that is building a dream team that can do the things you don't want to do, so you don't have to work the longer hours, so it can free you up. So building a business that gives you financial freedom allows you to invest. Investing in building a dream team means that they can do all the things you don't want to do, or the things you shouldn't be doing, so you can work less hours and work on the business. Yeah. And then what you get is you get this self-fulfilling prophecy, where the more you're working on the business and the more your purpose is aligned and you're doing what you love, the more you're going to create the choice. Because the more money you create, the more you can build the team, the more money it creates. And that self-fulfilling prophecy ultimately creates a business that is generating sufficient financial rewards and you working less time, which gives you the choice of where, when, and how you wish to work.
That makes absolute sense. We talk a lot when we're meeting with people who are thinking about selling their business. So, and often we'll be having this conversation maybe 2 years, 18 months out from when they actually want to sell. And we'll always talk about the 2-week test, the holiday test. You know, can you go on holiday? Because if you can't go away for 2 weeks and sit on a beach somewhere and drink sangria, and with the peace of mind that the business is still going to be there when you come back, then when it comes to selling it, you largely are the business. And the other thing with that, of course, is you use the phrase, working on the business. And I know at the back of your head you were going to say versus working in the business.
Yes.
Which is how do you look forward and up to what's going on in the wider world if you're always looking inwards and then downwards about what goes on in the business? And
the reason you're looking inwards and downwards on the business is that you don't have that plan. You don't have that sat nav that tells you this is the end game, this is the route you should be taking, and this is what happens if there's a traffic jam.
Yeah, makes sense.
Because you're stuck in. And if you think about those 75% plus of business owners without that plan,
I'm still staggered by that.
just
I've
they're
written that
stuck
down.
in
It's incredible.
tactics because they
Yeah.
don't know what they should be doing to grow the business, because they don't have a plan that tells them otherwise.
Yeah.
So they come in on a morning, they open their emails, they fulfill tactical activity all day, but they're never actually taking that step back to take two forwards.
Yeah. That makes
And so they just get stuck like a hamster in this wheel and become trapped.
And you know, and following that through logically as you're talking about it now, you know, if you've got that plan and then you're building your dream team, well, if you know what the plan is, you know what the players you need in that plan to execute. If you've got a plan and you've got, you know, every business owner knows the challenge of having a load of good choices to make. How do I make the right choice out of a load of good choices? Well, you make the one that fits the plan. You know,
Yes.
it's simple as that. So absolutely makes
but
sense.
the plan is something to compare to. And when things aren't going well, if you've got a plan, you can look at the plan and say, well, there's a gap here, I need to do something about it.
Yeah.
But without the plan, you've got no datum line to compare it to. So you don't know any different.
Absolutely makes sense. So when you're working with, typically when you're working with clients, so you're helping them understand that. I mean, you know, for me, it's a question of genuine interest. You must come up against an awful lot of reasons as to why things can't be done. Why, you know, why people, oh, I would do that, but my circumstances are different, you know, and almost, I don't want to, it sounds bad, but almost people need to get out their own way, you know, I mean, how do, a couple of tips on how do people get that fire in their belly? Because there's nothing more powerful, is there, when you wake up in the morning and you want to bring on, you know, come on, bring on the world. We're going to change it today. How do you help people in that space, Gary?
I think some of it comes down to trust. You know, they know that they need to change something, but they don't trust the idea that they've got that's going to make that change.
Right.
And so the benefit, so what they do is, because they don't want to make that change because they fear it's not going to work, they do nothing.
Yeah.
And what my job is, and this is the benefit, I suppose, of 30 years plus of experience, is quite often I'll have a difficult conversation with a client to say, from my experience, you need to take a leap of faith here.
Yeah.
And it's going to be difficult. So let me just take as an example, somebody that wants to lose a key member of the team. I call them brilliant jerks. They're technically very good at what they do, but their value misalignment with a team is having a negative effect.
Yeah.
So I would have a conversation with a client to say, we need to lose this person, but they're afraid to lose that person because it's going to mean hard work for them for a period. And often I will say is, trust me, it will be hard work for a month or 6 weeks, but in 3 months, you're going to look back and go, oh my goodness, I wish I'd have made that decision 2 years ago. But they can't trust that scenario because they don't know what the possible outcomes are.
Yeah.
So my job is to say, I've been in this situation 1,000 times. And the benefit of a business mentor rather than a coach will ask clever questions. A mentor has been in that situation, so they can empathize and they can share their experience to say, this is how it's going to play out. Trust the process, and 99 times out of 100, they get the result they want.
Yeah, no, makes sense.
But they need somebody to hold the hand and guide them.
Interesting. When I was doing the research for having you on, you know, one of the things that really stood out to me was the need to have the tough conversations. And I mean, I'm just, whilst you're talking, I'm just looking at some of the questions that we've we've had in, and one of the things you just alluded to there was about trust. And so the question one of the questions that came in here was, how much a role does mindset play in this, you know, from changing mindsets, I guess, you know, there's and so the question here they've quoted saying, is it like the old quote, if you believe you can or you can't, you're probably right? I mean, it's how do you work with that ingrained mindset, you know, especially with people maybe whose mindset has got them success to a degree as well?
Yeah, do you know what? It's a great question, because you can have the best plan in the world, you can have the best product or service in the world, but if you believe you can't, that's what you'll get. I think the key for me with this is you've got to have a plan and you've got to have the mindset. The two go hand in hand. You can't have one without it. You know, you can have a great mindset, but no plan, you still don't get results.
Yeah, absolutely.
Set your great plan, no mindset, no results. So the key for me is to break this down into small manageable chunks. You know, if you think there's what, 220, 230 working days in a year, it's not about saying this is the result I want to deliver in the next year. What you've got to do is break it down and say, this is what I need to deliver today. This is what I need to deliver this morning or this afternoon. And so what you've got to do is break your challenge down into small manageable chunks. Break your year's goals down into 220 smaller manageable chunks, and then say, right, what do we need to do to achieve this morning's result? And actually, from a mindset point of view, it's easier to see a result in 4 hours' time than it is to see a result in a year.
Absolutely.
And then what happens is you try something, it works, and you get the confidence and the trust to try more. You try something and it doesn't work, and you go, well, I've only lost 4 hours. I've only lost one small part. Let's try something different. So it's all about breaking it down into small manageable chunks, and every situation's different. But my job with that experience is to try and gauge how small we break those chunks down to build that mindset.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's, and some of these, I've got a few more questions as they're popping up here now, but I know we're going to come on to some of these things as we go through. Good. So if we move on from the importance of defining what success means to an individual, to a business, and the plan they're going to form, and you started to talk about it there. You know, where are people now? And certainly, you know, we speak to, what do we get, about 3,500 or so a month of people looking to buy or sell businesses, and you know that broadly categories they overlap with a lot that you spoke about. You know, they're struggling in some way, or actually not so much struggling, there's frustration, just that sense that, you know, it just shouldn't be like this. It should just be better. Yeah. And this ideal that when you get to the next point, everything will be fine. But actually what we see in successful businesses as well is, yeah, I'm successful and by a lot of things I've, you know, tick that box, but there's something missing. There's something missing, and it might be that freedom or that choice or that time or whatever else. But, you know, does that broadly align with what you see? Is there anything else, you know, that stands out as to where people to start the process?
If I take it back to that element of purpose, which should be the pivotal part of any plan.
Yeah.
Very quickly, there's 5 elements of purpose. One is, are you doing something that puts fire in your belly every single day? Number 2 is, what service and value do you deliver to your audience? Number 3 is there an opportunity to grow? Number 4, what financial rewards do you want from the business and what you're going to do with those rewards? And number 5, what lifestyle do you want the business to give you and what you're going to do with that time off? You've got to get all 5 of those aligned. Now, if I share an example with you, I was chatting to a gentleman at a networking event a few months ago who was bragging almost that he had this multi-million-pound business that delivered him this great profits, and he drove this fantastic car and he lived in this amazing house, and he could buy all the things that he wanted to buy. Financially, great. But then he let it slip after a couple of clever questions to say, well, you know, his wife really can't remember what he looks like. His kids can't remember the last time he kicked a football round in the park with his kids. And I'm going, that's not a good business. You know, the money's one thing. If you don't have the love of your family and they don't see you from one week to the next, that is not a good business. So his definition of success was not a definition of success I would share. So it's about really understanding what's right for you. Now, if he wants no family life and he wants loads of money in the bank, great, crack on. But the reality is, for most business owners that I speak to, that I come across, is that they want to be spending more time with their families. They want to be switching off on holidays. They want to be enjoying the kids grow up, which means not working 70 hours a week.
Yeah.
Which means earning enough money to be able to have whatever nice things are, whether it be holidays and meals or clothes or whatever it might be. And so getting your purpose clear is about understanding when you are struggling or you are frustrated, what do you need to do to unlock that?
Yeah. Yeah. And is it fair to say, you know, that a lot of that, you know, a lot of that struggle, a lot of that frustration, you know, it keeps coming up with this idea of overwhelm. Is just, there's just so much going on, and it becomes a a vicious circle, doesn't it? Because if you're leaving the house in the morning with your, either your partner's unhappy, or your partner's unhappy, or you're going out after having a bad evening because you didn't get into whatever time at night, and you're feeling unappreciated, as because you're trying to do the right things by the business, but you've got those different pillars in your life that aren't stacking up. It just becomes a vicious cycle, and as soon as one of them's solved, then the others are just going to topple over. So it's clearly connected.
Yeah, and this for me is where people in my position really come into their own.
Yeah.
Because the job is to show a little bit of tough love sometimes and go, that isn't a good business. We need to break this and we need to fix it. But it's giving them the confidence that actually by making some changes, they can fix it.
Yeah.
But when you're frustrated, you're struggling, or something's missing, it's a bit like you can't see the wood for the trees, to use a phrase my mum used to use. You can't see what the next step looks like because it's foggy.
Yeah.
My job is to grab them by the hand and guide them and say, trust me, let's just take this one step at a time, but let's get rid of some of this overwhelm. It might be, if we talk a little bit earlier about if we can unlock the financial success of the business, sometimes that is getting rid of unprofitable customers or products, putting prices up, getting your marketing working. All of a sudden you start to generate more profit and more cash, so you can invest in team members to do some of the stuff you don't want to do, or even outsource it. That then frees you up, so you've got less overwhelm, less frustration. So it's just about making those small incremental changes. But the job for me is, it's a bit like a good car mechanic will listen to a car and tell you exactly what's wrong with it without having to lift the bonnet up, right?
Yeah.
My job, I can literally, within 20 minutes of being with a business owner that just talks to me about how things are going, within 20 minutes, because of my experience, I can really pinpoint the 2 or 3 things that are holding them back. And we go, right, let's focus on these 2 or 3 and let's really start to unlock that potential.
Yeah. Great question here, and this is from thanks Phil for this. It's not our mutual friend Phil, another Phil, but said fully understand that planning can save time in the long run, essentially, but in the long run, but it's the initial time that they're short of, because they're caught in this vicious cycle. How do you break the cycle? How do you draw a line in the sand that just says, enough? If I don't do something different, I'm on a race to the bottom. But I've got all these things in front of me because I haven't planned.
Yeah, do you know what? That is an absolutely fantastic question, because one of the reasons that I hear for people not having a plan is, I don't have the time. Now, traditionally, you'll have seen these. Traditionally, a business plan is yay thick, multi-pages, developed off-site somewhere in a smoky boardroom.
Yeah.
They're old school for me. The plan that I use is a single page. It's called Strategy on a Page.
Yeah.
And it's a single A3 page. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
I can share this with you afterwards.
Yeah, please do. We'll get it out.
But on this page, you've got everything you want on there, from your purpose, your vision, your values, all your strategies, all your key measures. You've got everything on a single page. Now, that typically would take 12 hours to pull together. 12 hours over a 6 or 8 week period. If you can't find an hour and a half a week for 8 weeks that's going to stop you working 75 hours, then I'm not really sure that I can help. But for me, it's about saying, you've got to put that 12 hours in to develop the plan that's going to stop you working those long hours. And quite often there's a trigger point. Quite often it's they've had a massive row with a home that said, I can't, you're working too many hours. Or they've had a situation where they couldn't pay the staff wages one month.
Yeah.
So quite often there's a trigger point that says something needs to change. And at that point, they can justify putting the time and financial investment into developing a plan that's going to unlock them from getting into that situation again.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It leads into another question. Thank you, Sarah. I think I've read that. Yeah, Sarah. Sorry. So, some of the things you're talking about there, there's a trigger event, and where does accountability fit in? Because I think for a lot of business owners, that if you know, if you're a bigger organization like the ones we talked about earlier on, where there's a board who's actually checking what goes on, but for a lot of owners who are they're doing half a dozen different jobs in a business, and they don't have that accountability because they're just getting on with getting things done. But clearly it's critical, because you otherwise they don't have it. It comes in when it is a partner or a loved one or the last person on earth you want to be causing any distress to.
It's fundamental. You're going to go home after a 12-hour day to chat to your spouse that's going to hold you to account about why you've not done X, Y, or Z. Well, the last thing they want to talk about is your business.
Yeah.
They maybe want to talk about their business or their day or whatever it might be. So quite often, your family will not hold you to account. And it's really, really easy to say, I've had a great day, or I've had a productive day. You're not going to go home and say, I've not made those sales calls I should have made. I've not submitted that proposal I should have submitted, because you're going to find excuses. What an accountability partner does is to say, why have you not made those sales calls? Why have you not submitted that proposal? Why have you not put those prices up? Because they're not emotionally attached to the business. And I get a lot of my clients say, and in fact, I had one this morning, and she said to me, I knew what I needed to do. You've not told me anything that I didn't know I needed to do. But what you have done is you've given me the kick up the backside to do it. So by me, just saying it in plain English and saying this needs doing by this date or this time, they now forced to take action, because they know that taking that action, they're trusting that those small steps are going to get them the result.
Makes absolute sense. So if we look at it, then we've helped a business get to a stage where they've recognized they've got a problem, and they're honest with themselves about the problem, and they're honest about the fact that without a plan, there's not going to be a solution to this. It is going to be more of the same. So if we look at starting points, because this is I must have seen, I'm just scanning through the questions here. There's certainly 4 there about where do you start, variations of a theme. Where do you start? And we've got some slides up here from previous conversations and things that you said, that typically where people need to identify what's important to me. Well, if that's important to you, that's probably a good starting point. But you just talk us through again in your experience where the different things that become critical to people, and how you approach where they start.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, every person, every business, every sector, every situation is different. There's no two are the same. So everybody's starting point and everybody's expectation of a finish point are different. And I've talked about this concept of business owners being trapped. Now, what's trapping them? That the trigger point for what's trapping them, or what they want as in terms of success, is different for everybody. So we've got something that we call a business trap diagnosis. Business owners are trapped. So we've got a simple tool, 8 questions, and it basically asks you to score yourself on a score of 1 to 12, where you currently are against each of these particular 8 areas of business, and where you want to be in an ideal world. So there's a gap analysis. And what it basically does is, by you mapping out where you are now against these 8 criteria and where you want to be against those 8 criteria, it uses some very, very clever algorithms in the back to identify what the biggest shortfall is, and therefore where you should get started. So for example, if somebody says that they're working, incredibly long hours, the working weekends, the working bank holidays, they never switch off. But in an ideal world, they want to be spending more time with the family. They want to be leaving the mobile phone at home when they're on holiday. It might be that identifies that business lifestyle is their key issue. And we've got to focus on easing that before we look at something else. Another one, for example, might be a business owner that is, I hear people say, I've not taken money out of the business for 6 months. I'm great. Well, I go, you've not taken money out of the business for 6 months. You're building a really bad business there. So for some people, it might be that we need to focus on how we can generate more cash flow in the business in order to be able to pay them a greater dividend or a greater salary to ease their financial situation. So what this tool does is it asks a bunch of questions, score where you are now, score where you want to be, and it uses an algorithm to say, in your current situation, you need to focus on one of these eight criteria that we've got on screen.
Makes sense.
And then what we do is, again, there's a little bit of clever behind this, but let's say their biggest issue is, for example, lifestyle. They're working too many hours. So what we then do is we send them a tool that allows them to prioritize the things that they should be focused on and look to identify the things that they can outsource in order that they can immediately start to improve their business lifestyle. So it helps them identify where they are, and then it provides them with a tool to start to unlock the potential in that area.
Yeah. Excellent. I mean, what I find interesting with this, again, from our own experience, is that, you know, when the but someone wants to sell a business, then obviously typically where they're dealing with us, or there's what happens when someone wants to sell a business, and what we see as to why businesses don't get bought. You know, and often, you know, we'll have marketed the business, we get a great response from it, loads of interest. We arrange the viewings, have the first conversations, everything's going really, really well, and then it comes into due diligence when they're actually getting under the skin of it, and that's where then the cracks start to appear, and you know, and an owner will start. A potential buyer will start looking at thinking, you know what, I'm probably better off starting up something similar myself, you know, and getting it right first time rather than acquiring something, because it now looks like I'm going to be fixing problems for a long period of time. But we also know is that, you know, people like to see when they're buying a business that the business hasn't got to where it is now by chance. You know, that there has been a bit of a plan. And if you're buying into a continuation of that plan and the seller's got a valid reason, you know, why they're not seeing it through. And often that might be the case that they're incredibly entrepreneurial. They've seen the opportunity and they've got it to a certain stage, but they fully recognize that the things that excited them and got their fire in their belly to get them to that stage are not the things that, and they're not the right people either to go out and do it in the future. So they'll look to say, you know, time's to move on because I've seen a new opportunity. I'm going to go and do something else. Now they're great businesses for us because they've been started with passion, you know, and they're got to a good place, and the chance for someone else with a different set of skill sets, complementary, to come in and build it out. And that's absolutely fantastic. But if there isn't that logic behind it, if there's just I can't find this paperwork, I can't find that, I don't really know what I'm doing, I've got a load of nightmare clients, but I've had them forever, so that's why I don't get rid of any of those. And actually, I'm not selling a business, I'm jumping ship, you know, and people pick that up, you know, very, very clearly. It's all avoidable. It's all avoidable, you know,
with a plan.
Absolutely.
And you know, Matt, these are the conversations I have with clients. If we can understand what exit looks like to them, and 95% of business owners have never even thought about exit, let alone have a plan towards exit. And let's face it, everybody's going to exit the business at some point, whether it's through a sale or whether it's in a wooden box. So I would say, look, you need to start to think about exit. And sometimes they get to an age where they say, I want to be out of here by the time I'm 55 or whatever it might be. Sometimes it's a lease that they say, I want to be out of here before the lease is up.
Absolutely.
And then we say, right, okay, what are the key ingredients we need to start putting in place in order that we've got a business that's exitable? And you talk about the 2-week test. I often use a 3-month test, a bit more provocative. Can you go away for 3 months and will your business still run and still grow? And if the answer is yes, then you've got a team that can run this business without you. Then we go, have you got long-term contracts in place that will continue when you walk out of here? Is your contracted guaranteed revenue is something that's of interest to a potential buyer so they can get an ROI on their investment? So we start to look at what some of those key ingredients are and say, right, in order that we can achieve X% of contracts on, you know, 3-year deals, or, you know, X percentage of our monthly turnover is on recurring revenue, we need to have a plan towards achieving that. And these are the small stepping stones that we start to put in place to get them from A to B in order that they've got a business that's ultimately exitable.
Yeah. And, and I can say as well on that is that that's going to maximize the valuation of your business, because someone coming in who's buying a proven revenue stream, that's a very, very healthy conversation to be having. Very, very, very healthy indeed. And we see it all the
And
time.
just as an example, I've been doing some work with a client recently who's got a software product that they sell into a particular sector. They put that software product, because there's a little bit of configuration and design, it's on a 3-year contract. But when the 3-year contract is up, it just goes on to a rolling, I think, 3-month contract. And that's great, it works. So I'm going, once all of those initial contracts have expired, your entire revenue is only 3 months away from being gone. What you need to do if you're looking to exit this business at some point for some considerable value is you need to be renegotiating those contracts onto 3 or 5 year deals. So that when somebody comes in, they're going to look at your contracted revenue and go, everything's on a 3 or a 5 year deal. If they look at your entire revenue and go, everything's on a 3-month deal, could all go pear-shaped in 3.5 months. So we've started to migrate towards longer term contracts and how we put that in place. But he was unaware of it.
Yeah, no, it's and often it's, it's not because it's necessarily new news or, intellectually something people can't grasp. It's because they haven't had the time to look around themselves and think about what happens next. We'll always say to people when you're selling the business, every business is sellable, but think like a buyer. Think like a buyer. If you were coming into the business, and you were going to acquire it, what would you do? And even if you're not planning on selling your business, if you're just growing your business, it's a really healthy way to think about it, to have that constant, if I was selling, if I was buying, what would I think of this business from the outside? And that can be as simple as making sure that your business looks like a healthy growing concern, because you fix the sign that's broken and you don't let weeds grow in the parking lot and all of that sort of stuff. It's just that, the marginal gains that are also, incidentally, all the way back to what you said at the beginning, they're little wins. There's constant, if you've got this constant thread of little wins and stacking good habits, you're going to create a healthier environment that is again in part this virtuous cycle we were talking about.
Do you know what? All of those little wins, I call it a brag book. If you put all of those little wins and you document them, when you're having a tough day or a tough week, or you think the world's against you, or I want to exit, get your brag book out and remind yourself of how far you've come. It's not about the length of the road in front of you. Actually, some business owners would do well to just reflect on how far they've come.
Absolutely.
And sometimes when you look at those and go, wow, I've achieved quite a great deal, actually. And then that just from a mindset point of view, resets some switches and go, I can do this.
Yeah.
Because actually I've got a track record of doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes absolute sense. We have a weird, we have a weird situation often where the people with the best businesses have the lowest perception, if you like, of their success, because they're always thinking, what next? I've got to do this, and I've got to do that, I've got to do that. So they're getting stuff done and they're getting on with the next thing. Whereas then you have others who have got maybe an unproven concept, but they believe it's going to change the world, and want a huge amount of money for it. Whereas we're all saying, listen, I'm not saying the potential isn't there, but anyone buying the business will want to see that you've executed on some of that before you start trying to cash in on it. So get that plan, and so you've got those doers, the very rare ones who might not have a plan, but they prioritize really well. So kind of by default, they've created a plan.
And I think there's a trick here is when you've got your head around the fact that you're going to exit and you know what that looks like in a time scale. Yes, you've got to work towards putting all the elements in place, but what you need at the earliest opportunity is a business that's in a reasonable state, so it's almost sale ready, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
it's a bit like I dealt with a lady that ran a Montessori nursery. It's a particular type of education. It's a premium price. And from an Ofsted point of view, she made sure that her nursery was always Ofsted ready. What they didn't do is they waited for Ofsted to ring up and say, we'll be there on Monday, and they spent the rest of the week frantically tidying up. She got her business in a place where Ofsted, or even a prospective parent, could knock on the nursery door at any time and say, can we have a look around? And it was ready.
Yeah.
So getting a business that's ready, getting a business that's got your contracts in place, that's got your team in place, that's you've got all your financial measures in place and crystal clear clarity. And then if somebody does come and knock on the door that you're not expecting and waves a big fat check at you, you go, do you know what? I wasn't ready, but or I wasn't considering selling, but I am ready and I'll take the opportunity. So get ready and then fine tune, as you say.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely makes sense. You know, what we often see is people have an exit date, not an exit strategy. So that they say, oh, I want to sell it by this point. Okay, but you're not building towards it. You know, it's not a birthday. You know, it doesn't come around every year and you do nothing the rest of the time and then get a big cake and a few beers on the birthday and then carry on as normal the rest of the time. You need to build up to it, you know. And as someone very accurately put it, you know, it's not a birthday. It's more like doing a marathon. You know, on this date, you're going to be running this thing. So you need to be fit. And there's a load of stages you need to go through to get to that point, little things every day. I think much like you said at the beginning, all those little incremental wins and those little gains and just doing things right. And it breeds success. You know, if you're as the owner, you're doing that, people will feed off that around you, you know, and they'll step up, and that will hopefully take some of the take some of the pressure. I'm just going to get into a few more questions here, Gary. So we've got the Q&A coming up after the top 3 takeaways. But if we can just get, you know, there's a lot of great ideas and great points and must-dos that have come out of this. But if there are a number of things you would say to anybody, you know, if you leave here today and you never hear of Gary King or Tendo ever again, but what 3 things should be burned on your brain that are going to have the most benefit to anybody?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and that is a great question. So first and foremost, get yourself a plan. Get yourself a plan that articulates how you're going to get from A to B, but it starts with purpose and why you're doing what you do, and it finishes with an exit. So get yourself a plan. And as I say, I've got this single page plan that I do with most of my clients, everything you possibly want on an A3 page. So it's simple, it's easy, but the benefit of it being on a single page is it's dynamic and it's agile. So when an opportunity or a threat comes along, you can just recalibrate your plan like your sat nav recalibrates when there's a traffic jam, and bang, you're away. It doesn't stall your business. So get yourself a plan. The second one, get yourself an accountability partner. Get yourself somebody that's experienced. Get yourself somebody that's knowledgeable. Get yourself somebody that will challenge you, and get yourself somebody that will hold you to account to make sure you do the work that's necessary to get the results. That could be an accountant. It could be somebody else that runs a business. It could be a next door neighbor. It could be a business mentor. Get somebody that's going to give you some tough love when things aren't going to plan. And third, make sure you're crystal clear on what your exit plan does look like. So I want to exit in 5 years and I want to generate this amount of money when I sell. Okay. And it's not a round figure. You know, people say, I want £1 million. Why? Because I want to buy a house in Wales. Do you know how much a house in Wales actually costs?
Yeah.
You don't need £1 million. So fully understand what value you want from your business and what you're going to do with that money, and then work backwards. So if you know that you want to exit in 5 years and you want 7 figures in your pocket because you want to buy this, this, and this, then work backwards to today and say, what do I need to achieve each month, each quarter, each year in order that that business can be exited in 5 years and put 7 figures in my pocket? So basically get a plan that's got a purpose about it. Get yourself an accountability partner that'll keep you on track and kick you up the backside if you need it, and be clear on your exit and how you work towards that exit.
Brilliant.
So they're my 3.
Fantastic. Anyone watching, we will send those 3 to you via email afterwards. I didn't know what they were going to be, which is why they're not up on the screen. Gary, you just made a point there. I was smiling when you said it about the valuation. I want £1 million because I want a house in Wales or Spain, or insert name of location. So someone else in the industry, I'm not claiming fame for this, but a guy Clinton elsewhere in our industry said that for all the many ways you can value a business, one of the most common challenges you come up against is that somebody wants £4 million for their business because there's 4 directors and they want £1 million each, and there's no other thought behind that other than that. And so having that clearer goal absolutely makes sense. And we would also strongly recommend is that you know, and we get this all the time, people will call us up. We will value a business now on their numbers, and we will tell somebody what your business numbers need to look like to get to that point in the future, because you absolutely have to have a healthy shot of reality to assist you with your plan.
Look, I've had a conversation with you guys recently. I've got a client who is looking to exit in a number of years' time.
Yeah.
So, you know, nearer 10, to be fair. Is more on the acquisition trail himself at the moment.
Yep.
But one of the reasons I've had an early conversation with you guys is to say, right, he's got an idea in his mind how much money he wants to generate from the business when he sells. How much money does he want to put in his pocket for his lifestyle? Right. Can you help me identify where he needs to be in terms of EBITDA and a multiple in order for him to achieve that?
Yep.
So once we've got those numbers in place, we can say, right, here's our current EBITDA, here's our desired EBITDA. How do we get from A to B?
Yep, absolutely.
And then we get into the detail in the plan. But we've started now by understanding that's what success looks like. Here's where we are. How do we navigate our way towards the result we want?
Fantastic. So we will circulate those afterwards. Now we're just going to come into Q&A. I think so. Run through this. So questions had about how they avoid overwhelm, which we've spoken about breaking things down, understanding what success looks like, working your way backwards, breaking your day into breaking your objectives down, small wins, piece by piece, and absolutely getting the your one-page planner would absolutely make sense. We've had recognition. Planning saves time and adds value in the long run, but takes time initially. But as you've said there, you're only looking for 90 minutes a week over a number of weeks to build that plan into place.
And just on that one, Mark, there's a very famous phrase by Abraham Lincoln. And he said, if you give me six hours to chop down a tree, I'll spend 5 hours sharpening my axe.
Yeah.
And it's counterintuitive in business. You know, it's a bit like the rabbit and the
hare.
And the hare, right?
Tortoise and
the hare, right? Is that most business owners jump straight into action.
Yes.
What you should do is spend 5 hours sharpening your axe, developing your plan, and then once you've developed your plan, go away at chopping down your tree, and you'll chop it down much faster with a sharper axe.
Yeah, absolutely.
So put that time in up front, and actually it'll be quicker to implement the things that are going to get you the result.
Yeah, mate, makes absolute sense. Accountability, where does it fit in? We said that earlier on. One we haven't followed on, and I think this is thank you very much for this, Sharon. It's an excellent question to finish on. Gary, your favorite turnaround success story where all of these things have come together and produce something that walk away, the sort of thing, Gary, that makes you think, you know what, that's why I do what I do.
Yeah, do you know what? That's a great question. I've got many that I could share with you, and I'm going to share two quick ones, and it's for different reasons. One is a lady that I worked with, who I'll still work with, who came to me where she was in tears. The relationship was strained. She was working too many hours. She was underpricing her products and services. She can't remember the last time she rode a horse. And by putting a plan in place and implementing some of those things, she finished up putting her prices up by 45% in the first few months. We've put those prices up 20% every year for, I think, 6 years. So she's now getting the price she wants. She's working with the right clients. She's built a great team around her. And she's not eating into evenings and weekends, which means she's got a relationship back. So for her, it was about lifestyle and building a building a business where her clients valued her and would pay the prices. Still work with her today. The other one is a gentleman that ran a business that he was working incredibly long hours. He wasn't taking any financial rewards out of the business. And he was just your typical overwhelmed, uncertain which way to turn business owner. I'm 10 years into working with him. Still am working with him and his team. His business is now turning over in a month what he was turning over in a year.
Brilliant.
He's gone from 5 people in his team to nearly 30 people in his team. And he's got enough spare time on his hands that he's running a second business that's become successful. So for me, it was about unlocking that potential that he was struggling to unlock because he was getting in his own way. He was just trapped in this cycle if he wasn't certain how to break the sequence. So he's now turning over a month what he was turning over a year. He's getting the financial rewards. He's built a second business. He's got a team that can run the business. And he's very, very, very clear on his exit. But we've got plans to grow the business by another tenfold in the next 3 years.
Superb.
So, and he's one that I'll chat to you about at some point.
Yeah.
But you know, his was all about a plan and exploiting the opportunity and taking the financial rewards out of the business. Yep. And the other one was about getting a lifestyle and a relationship back on track, riding a horse and working with clients that valued her and would pay her prices.
Yeah. Two things there for me that are really fascinating, especially the first one is that, you know, and I hadn't really thought about this before, but the lady's personal level of self-esteem and where mentally she felt she was at when she came to you was reflected in the prices and the way she valued her service to the market. Whereas, so what you've done as a pair of fresh eyes have looked at that and said, no, you're worth more. What you do is worth more to the market, but because you're feeling down and whatever and overwhelmed and everything else, you can't see that. So, you know, and that is literally your own mindset stopping you from realizing your opportunities.
Absolutely. And do you know what, Mark? We talked earlier, didn't we, about taking that leap of faith and trust. Yeah. Her biggest issue was, if I put my prices up in line with what I want to charge for my services and my experience, I think a lot of my customers are going to walk away. And what I said to her is, if we justify why we're putting the prices up, we're very crystal clear about, you know, we've over-serviced you. We're now going to charge you for that over-servicing. And if you value that over-servicing, here's our price. Yep. If you don't, we won't do the work next year. So It was about alignment of service and value. And we articulated it very well, and we positioned it over time in a 4-month period. And I said, the customers that walk away are the time hoovers, the ones that don't value you, will never refer you, don't appreciate you, and the ones that are price sensitive, and they're not the right clients. And she was scared of losing a tranche of clients. When we put the prices up, and I'm talking, she had maybe 150 clients at the time, we put the prices up by, on average, 45%. I think she lost 3 clients. And the three were the biggest 3 pains in the asses that she had.
Absolutely.
And she said, thank
I've
God
had that exact
they've
conversation
gone.
with someone.
Yeah, thank God they've gone, because I never made money on those 3 clients because they were constantly on the phone. My team hated them and they never referred me.
Yeah. No, really, really interesting. And on the other business, you said about creating the time to go out and, you know, start another business. And, you know, I have this theory that I'll bore anyone to death that will listen, that everyone's got a 1 to 10 skill set, and you should spend the vast majority of your time utilizing your 8, 9, and 10 skills, because they're your USPs. That's where you're different from other people. And the thing is, your 4, 5, and 6 skills are someone else's 8, 9, and 10. And guess what? They probably love doing it, the things that you don't. And once you create that time, and it's good for your business, you know, if you're unleashing your top level skills elsewhere, then you're enabling the whole business, you know, and you don't have to be great at everything. You have to be great at what you're great at, you know, and get other people to do other things.
I pay more than the going rate for my accountancy services, my accountancy and bookkeeping.
Yeah.
Why? 2 reasons. Firstly, they're brilliant at accounting and bookkeeping. I can do it. It doesn't put fire in my belly. They can do it a lot better than I can. But also, she holds me to account. So she's my accountability partner. So every month she sits me down and she says, hey, Gary, here's how you're performing on your profit and loss. Here's how you're performing on your turnover, your profit, your cash collection, your liability, you know. And if I'm not hitting the sweet spot, she kicks me and she holds me to account. And I pay for that, but I pay for that because I've got a business that generates the funds to be able to afford the investment in the right members of the team.
Yep. Again, virtuous circle.
And the amount of people I hear say, oh, I can get my accountancy services for 100 quid a month. Yeah, you can. But do you know what? You won't get what you want. You'll get what you ask for. And there are 2 different things.
Absolutely, 100%. You know, we talk all the time about price and value, you know, and absolutely critical, but that's a whole different conversation for another day. Gary, I'm very mindful of the time you've given us today and very much appreciative of. So before we go, I would just like to make sure that everybody knows where they can find you, which if my slide would move on, I think I might have frozen my own computer by the time we've spent chatting there. So I will, and that means I can't share our details either. So Gary, we will circulate your contact details, email address, and everything everybody needs to be able to get hold of you and Tendo. Likewise, that same follow-up email will include our contact details. Thank you ever so much for your time, Gary. It's been absolutely fascinating. As I said earlier on, everybody watching, we will circulate Tendo's 3 top tips to make sure you take away. That's absolutely key. And we will also circulate how to view this webinar online. Gary, thanks ever so much. Everyone watching, thank you for your time. As always, look out for future webinars. And Gary, have a great evening. Thanks very much for your time today.
Mark, thank you. It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much.